Hi guys, welcome back to another Spud Live video. In this video I am going to be showing you the results of another soilless potato experiment using the same setup that I did in lockdown, over the first lockdown at my house. So this time it's been a little bit different. This is the plant, so I planted a single Desiree tuber in here rather than Charlotte, I think is what I used last time. So slightly longer life cycle, should be expected to produce bigger tubers, but the key difference is that it's been under a 24-hour photo period. So basically that means that there's been light shining on it 24/7 for the entirety of its life cycle. So it grew very, very quickly, and it grew very, very bushy, very, very thick stems, very interesting growth pattern. I had to pin it up because it was slightly floppy. One of these stems is completely senesced. The other two could probably go for a little bit longer, but I'm bored and I want to see what's happened. So we might as well just start taking the thing apart. So it's had the aeration stone in it, that's a tube for that, because if you remember from my first experiment we had a problem with root rot because there wasn't enough oxygen getting to the roots, and that massively affected, or probably massively affected, the yield. That was fixed in the second iteration, the last time I ran this experiment, when I grew Charlotte here under a natural photo period over the winter, and we got slightly better yields. So the roots have been aerated well. The only problem I think we've had is because the lights have been on, the lights get very, very hot. The substrate in the grow chamber in this top part, oh, I need to take those out, has dried slightly, and it kept drying frequently. I would re-wet it, but it would dry out very, very quickly, and I think that may have had some sort of quality effects on the tubers, but we'll find that out in a minute. So first thing I'm going to need to do is get rid of these stakes. Oh. So the plant looks slightly sad now, but it was much, much, much bigger. It produced 3 main stems, each of which produced a few secondary stems. Let's cut these down. So quite a large plant. I mean, you know, each of these probably had leaves out to sort of this sort of diameter, so that's why I've sort of pinned them apart so that they didn't overlap too much. So there we go. They are very, very floppy now, apart from this one because it's got no leaves left on it. So I will cut these off and we can have a look. So you can see they're pretty substantial, and they've grown in this interesting sort of zigzaggy way. I don't know why that is, but looks quite cool. So I assume, Keith, that you are watching this. That's what they had left. I think the camera's making them look quite a bit greener than they actually are. I don't know if I can fix that because there's nothing. Maybe that will help. So this is white, but it doesn't look white, so maybe that'll give you a better idea of what colour they are. Maybe I can make it look whiter, and then that will make this more accurate. But it is pretty yellow, lots of burnt tips. But yeah, Keith is the man. Keith will know how long they had left. Obviously this one was a goner. But it shouldn't make too much of a difference because they look like they're on their way out anyway. Let's get this up. I like the drawing, so I'll put that back up. Okay, let's pan down and have a look what we have in here. So already we have one tuber that looks like it might be bigger than all of the ones in the last experiment combined. Oh, there's 2. So we are off to a decent start. What's the best way to do this without getting coir everywhere? Are there any buckets in here? A bucket. So, sponsored by, not sponsored by Hoax. I'd love to be sponsored by Hoax, that would be amazing. Hoax, if you're out there, I love your t-shirts. Okay. So I can already tell that there's a fair few tubers in here because the surface of the substrate, I nearly forgot how to say surface there, let's pan up ever so slightly so you can see my gorgeous face, was bumpy. So the surface of the substrate was very, very uneven, suggesting to me that there was something displacing it from below. I've got a stole on there with a tiny, tiny little tuber, but I'm not going to count that. Is there a better way to do this? I can feel more tubers. Oh, let me show you the roots. There we go, they're the roots. They have only recently gone that brown, and they are also not as brown as that in real life. I think this is an issue with Samsung cameras, as they tend to oversaturate things. But these were very, very white up until a couple of weeks ago. I don't know what the little black bits are. I assume it's just flecks of coir that have gone down through the grill, but I don't know. They could be a disease. We did have a problem with the other soilless potatoes that I've been growing. They were growing really, really well, again under 24 hours of light, same cultivar, Desiri, doing really well, and then all of a sudden they just flopped over, started wilting, and lots of the leaves died. No idea why. It may be that I dropped the photo period because I wanted to induce tuberization. Maybe that was a stress that they couldn't deal with. It may have been that the food ran out in the irrigation system, and it may also have been that there were aphids everywhere, but they recovered after the food was topped up, after the lights were turned back on, and after we killed all the aphids. So we didn't really find out what was the problem. Maybe I'll superimpose a picture so that Keith can tell me what was wrong with them. But we couldn't figure it out. My supervisor at Branston Potatoes couldn't figure it out. I mean, to be fair, he was just looking at pictures that I'd taken with my aforementioned Samsung that makes everything look the wrong colour. So let's have a little look. You can see we're starting to get somewhere. We have some decent sized tubers that are slightly funny shapes, and they look like they have some kind of skin disease, so that's interesting. Why aren't you focusing? I don't know what's wrong with them. Look at that. It looks a bit like scab to me, and if it is scab, yeah, it's got to be scab. I suspect that has come about because the substrate has dried out. When I was a sampler, my boss and friend Albie told me that when the soil dries out too much, the potatoes are at risk of scab, and they like to keep everything slightly damp so that the scab doesn't get too bad. But we have a lot of tubers, so they're all slightly hideous, but we have a lot of them, and they're all quite big and they're all quite heavy. As a little baby one. Let's try and loosen this up slightly. I mean, they look like they have the plague or something. Not the most attractive of tubers. But we do have a lot, which is reassuring, because I think this, whatever this is a fixable problem. Little ones, yeah, like I said, these might have grown slightly larger, but, oh, there's a big one. It's like as big as my palm. Well, you don't know how big my palms are, so that's not particularly helpful, but I will measure some of them if I can find a ruler and weigh some of them too. I mean, they're really, really ugly. I don't think I'll be eating these. But we have a lot. They just keep coming. I buried these quite deep. I also hilled them up, although I'm not convinced that that actually achieves anything, because I think if it did, someone would have invented a way to do it on farms, and as far as I'm aware, no one has invented a way to do it on farms. All right, let's try and shake the root crowns out. Let's see if we can pull up the last tubers in one go. Little ones, more little ones. Very, very high tuber number, which is not what I was expecting, because the previous literature suggests that tuberization So the process by which the potato plant throws out these stolons and then the stolons swell up into tubers is supposed to be inhibited by long, i.e. 24-hour photoperiods. Originally these plants are from Peru. Apparently there's a short photoperiod there. The sun isn't in the sky for very long, so they've evolved to produce most tubers when there's the mother tuber, that's disgusting. When the photoperiod is short. Obviously a 24-hour photoperiod is as long as you can get. So I had read that tuberization would have been inhibited. So basically, I've done a terrible job of explaining that, but in a nutshell, you would expect fewer tubers when the lights are on for longer or the sun is in the sky for longer. I was predicting that we would have a few very, very large tubers, but in fact we have quite a lot of reasonably average sized tubers. If anything, they might even be slightly small. Okay, so I think that's all of them. Made a terrible mess. Sorry, Liam, I will clean up. Okay, so we have 1. Put them somewhere you can see them. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 on the floor, 15, 16, 17, 18 little tiny ones, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Let me get this one. So 26 tubers, that's quite a lot from one seed tuber, one plant that has made 3 stems. Unfortunately, they are all absolutely gross, but let's see if we can peel some of this off. Yeah, I mean that might just peel off. I mean they're still edible, I would assume. They just would never sell in a shop, which is unfortunate, although I never plan to sell these. I do plan to eat them, and maybe I'll still be able to do that. Right, now I will move the camera and we will weigh them. Okay, so we have a tray on here. It is TED, so the tray weighs less than 0.1 of a gram. I don't think we need to be particularly accurate with this, since it's not for anything specific, it's just my interest. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 26 baby ones that don't really count. As far as I'm concerned, that will put them in anyway. Why not? Okay, I don't know if you can see because it's quite glary. There we go. That is 2,152 grams, 0.8. It doesn't want to settle. Between 0.7 and 0.8. So, as near as makes no difference to 2 kilos. Which is pretty cool. That's quite a lot. I think that's more than I was expecting. 2 kilos out of, what is the volume? 15 litres. So a 15 litre pot effectively. And we've got 2 kilos of potatoes. So this is giving me ideas. Right, let me move the camera again and I'll talk about my ideas. Okay, so obviously this is not a lot of room for a potato plant, especially one that has effectively unlimited access to water and nutrients. That's my first idea. My first thought is I need to replace this, maybe with one this big. So this is where the nutrient solution goes with the aeration stone. Maybe I just need 2 of these stacked on top of each other. That's doable because I can just buy another one of those and get rid of this one, or I could use it for something else because they're quite handy, these little Euro boxes. Okay, so that's thought number 1. Thought number 2, because presumably the size of that box, going back to thought number 1, presumably the size of that box does have some limiting effect on the size of these tubers, because the ones in the corners I think were probably slightly smaller and slightly squished up. So there's probably even more potential to produce greater volume or a greater mass of tubers. Idea 2 is figuring out a way to stop this, because this is a problem. I suspect, if my theories are correct, that it is to do with this substrate drying out, that it will be less of a problem in my other soilless experiment where I'm comparing two different substrates. So one is coir, like I used here, and the other is a peat and vermiculite blend, which is commonly used in soilless experiments. I suspect that won't be a problem there. This won't be a problem there because those are fed and irrigated through the top. So all the water and nutrients goes in through drippers on the surface of the substrate, which should keep that substrate wetter than it was here, where all the water and nutrients are coming from below and only really being pulled up through the roots. There's a small amount of a small layer of damp substrate at the bottom just because of the humidity of the bottom chamber, and also because of some splashing from the air bubbles, I would imagine. But there's no real wicking of water up through the substrate, which is something else I'd be interested in trying, where instead of allowing the roots to grow down through the substrate, we have some kind of wick that goes up. I also want to try an NFT system, but there's all kinds of ideas. Yeah, I suspect that this scabby horribleness won't be a problem in that other experiment, and I think it's fixable just by keeping it damper in there. And it probably didn't happen before because there was no hot light above the plants, either at home or when I used Charlotte here, because that was just in a glasshouse compartment, not under lights. So I expect the heat from those lights has dried it out and resulted in this horrible scab. So that could be alleviated maybe by covering the surface of the substrate and just having holes for the stems to grow through, maybe. That might make it too humid, I don't know. These are all sort of trade-offs you have to consider. You don't want it too wet because that can cause its own set of problems, but too dry and we get scab. So with too wet you get things like rot, obviously, because rot loves anoxic or hypoxic and damp conditions. So that's idea number 2, try and fix the scab. Idea number 1, bigger box. Idea number 3 is some kind of NFT system. So NFT doesn't really work with potatoes because you get some quality problems from the dampness rather than the dryness. So an NFT system I think that would work for potatoes is one where you have a continuous flow of nutrient solution, which is what an NFT system is. So it's like 2-3 mil of flowing solution that flows constantly, that has all the water and all the nutrients that the plants need. Normally you would just suspend, or you would just have the plants dangling in that solution. Whereas I think you could, in potato, it would be better to have something like this suspended over a continuously flowing nutrient solution. And effectively, you would have the same method of production as my grow chamber box, but you would have a continuous flow, probably a greater water use efficiency, and because the nutrient solution would be circulating, you would be able to measure the levels of nutrients in there, and then top them up and then send it back through the system. So there's all ways to make this more complicated. This is a very, very simple system, which is definitely one of its strengths, but it is less efficient. So I think an NFT system would work better than even a fertigated system. The fertigated system is obviously the most similar to the field, but that makes it relatively inefficient because water is draining out the bottom all the time. So these are all things I can talk about later. I don't really need to talk about them now. All I wanted to show you really was that this works. Growing things under 24 hours of light is not as insane as a lot of people said it was. Potatoes don't need a dark period, obviously. They may perform better with a dark period. That's something I'm trying to find out now. Soilless potatoes do work. You just have to be a bit clever about it. You can't just shove them in a Kratky system or a DWC system. You've got to give them something to live in, probably, possibly, that's something I want to test as well in the future. But anyway, thank you for watching. Hope these potatoes aren't making you feel unwell, and I will see you in the next video. And because of popular demand, i.e. 2 people telling me I should still do it, even though it's stolen from Omar Isov. Peace!